All right, we're going to get started here. Some of you guys are still finding your seats. That's fine. My name is Josh Wynn. I am the program manager for Buckeye Wellness here at Ohio State. I want to thank you all for coming to today's Lunch and Learn. Actually, before we get started with our Lunch and Learn, I want to try something with you all. As we all know, November is Diabetes Awareness Month, but it's also the start of the holiday season. And during the holiday season, we like to focus on gratitude. So I'd like to practice a gratitude exercise with you all today. So if you don't mind pulling out your phones real quick. And with that phone, love for you to pull up the last text message that you sent. A lot of grumbling, I know. But gratitude is an expression of empathy, and compassion to one another. So I'd love for you to pull out that text message, and I want you to send that person, whoever you text last, something special, something that says, thank you for all that you do, showing your compassion towards them. So I'll give you about 15 seconds to type that out for yourself, and then we'll get started. All right? And let me know how that goes. And if you want to text my phone, great. Just kidding. I know you guys can't see your faces right now, but it's actually kind of cool because everyone smiled as soon as they pulled out their phone and started texting. So thank you. That was a pretty cool moment to see. So like I said, my name is Josh Wynn. I'm the program manager for Buckeye Wellness. I want to thank you all for coming today. A couple of announcements that we have out of our office. We have the Faculty and Staff Dodgeball Classic on December 18th over at the RPAC. So you can visit go.osu.edu/FSDodgeball to register a team of 6 or as an individual. We have our cooking demo in December, on December 10th, over at the Giant Eagle in Upper Arlington. So you can register on that on Link to Health. And then also our Healthy Holiday Cooking Lunch and Learn over at DLHRI. I know it's a little bit of a walk, but love to have you all out there for that. It's with the none other than the great Jim Warner, if you know who that is. He'll be leading our cooking demo for that. Additionally, towards the end of the year, we know that it's time to do biometric screenings if you haven't done one yet. So if you'd like to get yours done today, feel free to see Dixie outside to do that. Today's Lunch and Learn is titled Lifestyle Changes for Diabetes Prevention. Our speaker today is Samantha Cochrane. She is a registered and licensed dietitian currently working with the Comprehensive Weight Management Department here at the Wexner Medical Center. So please help me welcome Samantha.
Thank you, Josh, and thanks everybody for being here today. I like seeing everybody present for one of these things. So, to get started, today, like Josh said, I'm presenting Lifestyle Change for Diabetes Prevention. I developed the content today, but it was adapted from content developed by one of the other dietitians here for the medical center, Lori Chong, who's also a certified diabetes educator. So some of today's goals are to really understand the differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes, to understand some of those physiological changes, which basically just means how our cells change during type 2 diabetes, and then understand that some of these lab values we might get, how those reflect those changes. Also knowing some of the risks and complications associated with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, and then reviewing the diabetes prevention program and what contents it had in the research process and those lifestyle changes it asks you to make to prevent prediabetes and diabetes. So first, what is type 1 diabetes? So type 1 was traditionally known as juvenile diabetes, and it was because it was mostly diagnosed in children. So we saw the onset of it very early in life. It can appear later in life, we know now, but it is a chronic condition that's characterized by the pancreas stopping pretty abruptly making insulin. So it can kind of slow down making insulin, but the thing that we really see is that insulin treatment is going to be needed immediately for these patients with type 1 diabetes. Something interesting to note is of all the people with diabetes, only 5% have type 1. So type 2 diabetes is the other type of diabetes that is also a chronic condition, but it is different in that it can develop over time. It's a condition that affects the way your body processes glucose or sugar in your blood, and it can be developed at any point throughout the lifespan. It used to be thought of as an adult onset diabetes, or called adult onset diabetes, and you might still see that term used today. But we see it developed in children a lot more frequently, and it's usually associated with childhood obesity. In most cases, type 2 diabetes is first treated with medications, and then it can be treated later with insulin if needed eventually. It can be prevented, prolonged, and possibly reversed with diet and exercise. And remember, only 5% is that type 1 type. 95% of people with diabetes have type 2, which can be prevented. So what does this look like in terms of a cell of someone with diabetes? So we can see from this picture here, the root of our problem in type 2 diabetes is insulin resistance. Insulin here acts as the key to our cell. So insulin is the key that opens the glucose channel and allows glucose to enter the cell to be used for energy. So with insulin resistance, that cell makes it harder and harder for insulin to work, open that glucose channel, and allow that glucose in to be used for energy. So it takes more and more insulin to be able to open that glucose channel over time. And what happens is that leaves glucose sitting in the blood. And when glucose sits in the blood, that's where you get that high blood glucose or high blood sugar. And something interesting to note about people with high blood sugar, they have that symptom of fatigue or weakness. And really that's because that glucose isn't allowed to get into the cell to be used for energy. So insulin resistance, what causes insulin resistance? So there's many factors, few of which are the overeating of carbs, and that could be any type of carb, eating too much saturated or trans fats, inactivity, weight gain, genetics, or a combination of these factors. And something we like to note is that out of all of these factors here, genetics is the only thing we can't change. Everything else we can target with those lifestyle changes. So insulin resistance can develop to insulin insufficiency in people with type 2 diabetes. So over time, that pancreas is making more and more insulin to be able to allow the glucose into the cell. As the pancreas makes more and more, it begins to wear out. So it actually starts to produce less and less. At this point in people with type 2 diabetes, this is when they become dependent on those insulin shots. So pre-diabetes is that in-between state. So it's when your blood sugar is not quite high enough to be diagnosed as diabetes, but not quite low enough to be considered normal. Usually at this stage, there are no symptoms, and it can only be diagnosed with blood tests. Something good to note is that if we are diagnosed with prediabetes, we're in that in-between state, we should know it can lead to type 2, but it's a great opportunity to prevent or reverse the effects of insulin resistance at this point. So how do we know that our insulin resistance has developed into prediabetes or diabetes? The three main blood tests that are used are your fasting blood glucose, your hemoglobin A1C, and your oral glucose tolerance test. Your fasting blood glucose is going to be done traditionally on an 8-hour fast. So that means no eating 8 hours before this is done. And it's testing the ability of your body to manage that glucose or blood sugar level over that period of time. So once it's taken with a blood sample, you can see that normal would be below 100, 99 or below. Your prediabetes range, that in-between period, is 100 to 125. And then for diabetes diagnosis, it would be 126 or above. Your A1C, or hemoglobin A1C, is going to be a measure of the amount of sugar on the outside of a red blood cell. So it's taken in a percentage. And what A1C tells us is about how much your average blood sugar is over a period of about 2 to 3 months. So it gives us a longer term picture of how you're managing your glucose in your blood. So your normal would be 5.6 or below. That in between prediabetes is 5.7 to 6.4, and diabetes would be 6.5 or above. The oral glucose tolerance test is actually really common to see in gestational diabetes diagnosis. So if you're pregnant, you go in for this specific test a lot of times to see if you have gestational diabetes. But it can be used to diagnose type 2 as well. And what we do for this is also come in fasted, and you're given a glucose challenge. So that begins a 2-hour period where we can measure your glucose throughout the time that you're digesting that glucose challenge. But most will use that last 2-hour mark number, 2 hours after you're given the glucose challenge, to see where you lie in terms of having normal prediabetes or diabetes levels of your blood sugar. So how prevalent is diabetes? It's pretty shocking to me. Every time I see this, I am blown away at how many people are affected by this. So 1 out of 3 people have prediabetes. And of those people, 90% of them don't know it. And more than 30 million Americans have diabetes, which is 1 in 10. And again, the 90 to 95% of them have this preventable type, this type 2. So why is it going to be important to prevent? Why can't we just live with it, right? So prediabetes and diabetes come with their own risks and consequences. Prediabetes will increase a risk of diabetes and heart disease. And then diabetes will increase your risk of heart disease, specifically heart attack, stroke, and peripheral artery disease. We also know that developing diabetes leads us to be dependent on medications. And no one really wants to take medications for the rest of their life. And it starts out with medications that can end up being insulin. So it's just a consequence that's not desirable for most. We also see complications of people who have diabetes. So you can have kidney disease, eye disease, problems with your gums, your teeth. You can have foot problems, nerve damage. All of those things, the foot problems and nerve damage, can lead to those amputations that we see in people with diabetes. So let's test our knowledge a little bit. Mr. Potato had an A1C of 6 at his last visit to his doctor. Which of the following categories does his A1C fall into? Normal? Prediabetes? Diabetes? Okay. So it is prediabetes. And he is not happy. He wants to know what he can do to change his A1C and improve his health. So what can we do to prevent insulin resistance, prevent prediabetes and diabetes? So of those things that we saw that cause insulin resistance, we can't change our genetics, but we can make those lifestyle changes that will help with those other factors. So what are some of the lifestyle changes to prevent diabetes? There are going to be changes to how we move and what we eat, and it's diet and exercise. Why do we know that they work though? So the Diabetes Prevention Program was the big research study that told us that lifestyle changes are actually best when compared to medication and no treatment and preventing prediabetes from becoming diabetes. So we saw that people who received the intervention of lifestyle changes in this study reduced their risk of developing diabetes by 58%, which was more than that medication or no treatment. So what were some of the goals of this program? It was a year-long program, and it focused on weight loss, specifically a 5 to 7% weight loss in the first 6 months, and then increasing your exercise to 150 minutes per week. Also making diet changes to promote that weight loss. After the first 6 months, it was about maintaining that weight loss, losing more weight if it was appropriate, and then maintaining those diet and exercise habits. So what does that diabetes prevention program mean when it says eat well? What we mean is that we want to get the nutrients we need in the amounts that we need them. So we want to promote that 5 to 7% weight loss by potentially changing our typical diet that might be higher in total calories, fat, and sugar, and trying to choose more often foods or drinks that are higher in water, vitamins, and minerals. So what does this look like? We have a healthy plate here that we use at OSU for weight management. So this is a 8 to 9 inch plate, and it's a goal of what we would like most meals to look like. This 8 to 9 inch plate has these foods portioned in amounts that promote reducing total calories and weight loss. So let's go a little more in detail about what's on this plate. First and a quarter is meat and protein. So we have animal proteins or plant proteins that can both fit in this quarter of the plate. Animal proteins, we want to take note and say that we'd like to choose the leaner sources if possible. Choosing leaner sources will help you reduce the amount of saturated fat that you're eating, and saturated fat has kind of negative effects with heart health. So we want to try and limit that, choose those leaner sources of meat, because we are also, if we have diabetes or prediabetes, at risk for heart disease. So it's something else to think about. Dairy products can also serve as a source of protein, but they have their own little place on the plate, so we'll talk about them more in a bit. Plant proteins would be beans, legumes, nuts, and seeds, and they have good heart healthy fats in them. So something to think about would be potentially, since they're more heart healthy, adding these in more as that source of protein in that corner of your plate. So our other quarter of our plate are whole grains and starchy vegetables. So whole grains, we want to be 100% whole grain. And this is going to be things like breads, pastas, rices, quinoas, and then barley, oats, and bran are other good examples. And starchy vegetables also fit in this corner. And what we want to keep in mind is that we would like, if both things are served on a meal, both of them to fit in that corner of the plate. So let's talk a little bit more about whole grains. Why choose a whole grain versus a refined grain? So if we look at our picture here, a whole grain has 3 parts to it. A refined grain is going to be missing one of these parts. So we know white bread and rice are made only from that endosperm section, whereas a whole grain would have all 3 parts. And the reason we want all 3 is because they have their own unique like vitamin or mineral, fiber or protein that we'd like to take advantage of all of if we can. If we're looking at a whole grain product, we like to choose one without ingredients like enriched flour or an enriched grain. And then also avoiding any source of trans fat, which there are a few different types you might see in a food label listed there. So these stamps by the Whole Grain Council are also very helpful in terms of labeling something that's whole grain and helping us find it in the grocery store. The one all the way on your left is going to be 100% whole grain. So looking for that more often than some of the others that just contain whole grain, so we know we're getting the most we can. So something to think about with whole grains is that they advertise as very healthy, wholesome, quality ingredients, but they're really sneaky about the sugar. So some of these products have some hidden added sugar that we wouldn't really think about because, like this box of cereal here, it looks super healthy, right? So if we take a look at the ingredients, still looking super healthy. It's got that whole grain wheat, it's got whole grain rolled oats and wheat flour in there. So all those good whole grains that we're looking for. But taking a look at that food label a little closer, this is one of our new food labels that we like because we can see the added sugar. We look at that food label and it's got 10 grams of added sugar. So overall, we want to have about less than 10% of our calories a day from added sugar. And instead of thinking about a number of grams, just kind of think looking for less on most of the products that you buy. So just checking for products that have less added sugar than others. So if we take another look at those ingredients, we say, oh, that makes sense. The second ingredient is sugar. So when you're looking at ingredients by weight, they go in order. So we know the first one, the whole grain wheat, is most prevalent, but sugar is the second ingredient. We also have sugar in the cranberries and then molasses down there at the bottom too, so we can see where that added sugar is coming from. This is another one, so Nature Valley, it's this natural, wonderful product, and it looks super healthy. The first ingredient is whole grain oats, which is great, but we see that there is some sugar in there. And this is the older food label. We can't really see what's added and what's there, but we know like the oats, probably not a lot of sugar in them. So let's take another look at the ingredient label, and second ingredient is sugar. And then the fifth and sixth ingredients are sugar. So it's just something to think about comparing products at the grocery store, looking for overall less added sugar, not just in whole grains, but in most things that we eat. So next little section of our plate, or should I say big section, is that half of our plate that we want to make non-starchy vegetables. So those non-starchy vegetables, I sound like a broken record, a dietitian telling you to eat your vegetables, but it is so important and they have so many benefits, right? So they have various vitamins and minerals depending on what you eat. They have fiber, they're lower in calories. They have phytochemicals, which are like positive health beneficial plant chemicals. So varying these, making them half of your plate, or if it's a mixed dish, making sure you're really beefing, wrong term, but really increasing your vegetables in those mixed dishes, adding more if you can, to get the most vegetables you can at a meal. The benefit of doing this, especially for weight loss in the diabetes prevention program, is going to be adding in that fiber at the meal to keep you feeling fuller, and then having the lower calorie option of these vegetables be most of the meal. So you're reducing your overall calories and promoting that weight loss. So fruit and dairy are our next groups. Fruit and dairy are kind of off to the side of the plate. They want for fruit to aim for 2 to 4 servings per day. And that's gonna be like a tennis ball sized whole piece of fruit, or like a lunchbox size if you see that at the grocery store. Or if it's a bite-sized piece of fruit or a cut up fruit, it would be like a half cup to a cup, depending on what it is. So the reason we want to add fruit is because there's fiber, good vitamins and minerals, and they're a good natural source of sugar. So if we are eating sugar, we want it to be from fruit. Dairy or dairy substitutes, we want at least 2 to 3 servings of those per day. They're high in protein and a good source of calcium or vitamin D. And we would like the serving size to be from these various different types, at least the 8 ounces of milk, yogurt, 1 to 2 ounces of cheese. So something to think about with dairy is that fruit and dairy, is that fruit has fiber, dairy has protein. So both of these things can help keep you feeling full, and if we don't want to eat them like next to our plate or with our meal, they make a really good snack. So pairing them even can help keep you feeling full between meals. Having that structured snack can help you keep reaching from something convenient or easy. When we do choose dairy, we want to choose the lower fat or no fat varieties. And then we also want to look for dairy substitutes that are unsweetened to, again, avoid that added sugar. And then we also want them fortified with that calcium or vitamin D that we might be missing from dairy products. So some other tips for a healthy plate. We want to use cooking methods that fit our goal to lose weight. So trying to reduce overall calories. We want to do more steaming, baking, grilling. There's the Instapot and the air fryer now, which make good Christmas gifts. It's coming up. For people to help reduce that oil at meals, or oil or butter. So any kind of fat will just add calories, right? So we just want to reduce the amount that we're using. And then when we are looking at the quality of fat and our heart health, trying to use more often those unsaturated fats or the fats that are liquids at room temperature. So some good ones might be olive oil or canola oil, and then less of like the saturated fats that are solid at room temperature, so less of the butters or the lards or the things like that. We also want to choose like fresh or fresh frozen ingredients most often to avoid extra processing or salt. Something else to think about in terms of sugar is limiting those concentrated sweets. So we talked about sugar being kind of hidden in the whole grain products. It's not hidden in these concentrated sweets, right? These are pretty sweet, drinks specifically. We can taste the sweetness in them, but how much sugar is really in some of these? So if we look in the corner here, the top right corner, we see that about 1 gram of sugar is equal to the size of a quarter when it's kind of splayed out flat. So looking at some of these drinks, 1 can of Pepsi has 40 grams, so 40 quarters. Your naked drink is 34 grams. It's only 6 less than the Pepsi. And then we have 32 grams of vitamin water, 77 in a bottle of Mountain Dew, and 25 in Monster. So these are just things to think about as we're choosing these beverages, right? So we see these numbers and they're a little scary, a little overwhelming, but what we can do is choose the 0 calorie, 0 sugar versions more often, reaching for these less, and then overall, if we are choosing a beverage, choose water most often. So one tip that I like to give is get the 64 ounces in per day, and then any drink you have after that can be additional. But hopefully you feel satisfied in terms of thirst with this 64 ounces, and you're saving yourself calories, you're saving yourself sugar. So in terms of diets, there's so many diets out there in the media, and the word diet to most people means a temporary change, right? To lose weight. So this is why as a dietitian, I'm never gonna prescribe a diet. And most dietitians wouldn't either, and that's why the diabetes prevention program doesn't focus on a diet. They focus on lifestyle changes, which mean long-term changes to last the rest of your life. But there are many diets out there in the media, and are any of them any good? I like to look at the Mediterranean diet because the principles of this diet align really well with our plate. So this was based on studies in the Mediterranean where these people lived longer, and they wanted to know why. So their meals are built around the plant part of their diet. They're focusing on the vegetables, the fruits, the beans, legumes. They cook with good, heart-healthy plant oils and use a lot of herbs. They also use, compared to an average American diet, a moderate amount of animal product, less red meat, and then they use more of those fatty fishes that have more of like the heart-healthy fats in them. So an interesting component, I think, to this diet is also buying locally grown products is thought to bring some benefit to them because they don't have a Kroger over in the Mediterranean. They don't have Giant Eagle. They're buying from little markets that are all selling locally grown produce, locally grown meats and things like that. So it's just interesting, and it is just one of those that fits really well with what we're talking about today. So other diets in the media now eliminate carbs, right? Big one right now is keto. Heard that a lot. So why not eliminate carbs? They're kind of the evil villain, right? Like they're in our list of the reasons that cause insulin resistance, too many carbs. Well, there are some benefits to having carbs. Carbs come from, in our diets, the grains, starchy vegetables, fruit, and milk groups. So all of these kind of bring to the table their own benefits, right? They have fiber, they have vitamins and minerals, they have those plant chemicals that are health beneficial, those phytochemicals. So eliminating these might eliminate some of those vitamins, minerals, fibers, things that we aren't going to get anywhere else. We also see that when people eliminate food groups, they lose weight quickly right off, but long term it's not sustainable. So that weight is either gained back or gained back even more. So overall, and with the research out there now, we recommend carbs in moderation, and moderation is key. So another benefit that we see in weight loss is tracking what you eat. So we can start by looking at food labels to kind of see serving size. I like this new food label a lot because this food label is from one of those like medium-sized bags of chips, the ones that look like they're for one person, but they're actually not. So we used to see 160 calories on one of those medium bags of chips. And so it looked great, right? Well, there's 3 servings in there. So what we actually see is per package, there are 430 calories. So paying attention to serving size on those food labels, also looking for the total fat, just to look for less to save us calories, can be good as well. Even though we are looking for less fat, we don't have to be super scared of fat. It's just a way to look at things to save some calories. We can also track what we eat using apps or paper food logs. For those apps, there are so many out there, right? There are tons. They all have benefits. They all have drawbacks. So really, no matter how you track, even if you don't want to use an app, you want to use a paper food log, whatever works for you, the accountability there and the awareness it brings to what you're eating is the benefit. So whatever works for you. The goal of tracking is to burn more calories than you take in. So most of those apps out there will have like a method they use to give you a calorie goal. If you feel like your calorie goal that you're given is not working for you or isn't accurate, you can always see a dietitian. We love to give you some weight loss tips or that calorie goal. So we also want to kind of be prepared and plan our meal, snacks, and shopping trips. When we take the time to plan, it sets us up for success. So it keeps us from having those moments where we have no idea what we're doing for dinner and we're reaching for something convenient that doesn't necessarily align with our goals. So we want to plan meals using what we already have in our kitchen, what's on sale, and then just keeping in mind that healthy plate. We also want to use this plan to create our shopping list so we know what we're going into the grocery store for. So continuing to be prepared, we can make cooking easier for ourselves too. So cleaning as we cook is a way. Also, if you are like cooking throughout the week, trying to prep some things beforehand, cutting up vegetables after you get home from the grocery store, or if it's snack type foods, kind of packaging them individually. You can also kind of meal prep and cook large batches of something. You can freeze it or leave it in the refrigerator to take during the week. Whatever works for you and gets you to that point where you're prepared for all your meals. We can also change some of our favorite dishes to make them fit our plate better. So like we were talking about with mixed dishes, adding in more vegetables. We can dress up our foods with some of the lower calorie things that add flavor. It can be things like those fresh herbs or lemon juice, salsa even is good to add to things, whatever your preferences are. Eating out is something we need to be prepared for as well. So eating out happens. We know that when we eat out, we're going to get a little bit more salt, fat, and potentially sugar. So being prepared to choose places that set you up for success, that align better with your goals, can be helpful. So we know that sit-down restaurants give you a little bit more of a choice in terms of finding something that fits your plate a little bit better. Looking for menu items that are baked, grilled, healthy, labeled, low fat, all of those things can maybe show us that this would be a good choice. Asking questions is really important. So you're paying for a good meal out, you want it to align with these goals. Don't be afraid to ask the waiter or the chef, what's in this, how is it cooked, so that you get what you pay for. We also want to keep in mind mindful eating. So mindful eating is a really good tool to help us listen to our hunger cues and really know that we're eating when we're slightly hungry versus waiting to eat when we're excessively hungry, because this could lead to overeating. So when we look at this scale, eating at that slightly hungry mark and stopping eating when we're satisfied can be helpful in kind of controlling our portions. And also mindful eating can be helpful in understanding why we're eating. So kind of taking a second to think about if we're eating because we're actually hungry. Are we eating because we're stressed? Are we eating because we don't feel good, we feel sad? So taking a second, if we are feeling another thing besides hunger, trying to channel that into another activity. We can use this mindful eating tool to be consistent to eat throughout the day. So eating when you feel slightly hungry, usually that means trying to avoid those long periods throughout the day without eating. So avoid skipping meals and scheduling meals or snacks to eat consistently. So let's test our knowledge again. Which part of our healthy plate would quinoa fit? Anyone say dairy? Protein? Vegetable? Starch or grain? Good. Sorry, I thought I would trick somebody, but obviously not. You guys are smart. So starch or grain. Quinoa is a grain. It's out there in the media as like a higher protein grain. So some people I feel like might think it's a protein, but it's just a high protein grain. The second part of that diabetes prevention program in terms of lifestyle changes was to be active, to increase your activity to 150 minutes a week. So it aligns really well with what the American Heart Association tells us for the average person, which is to be active 150 minutes per week doing moderate intensity activity. They also say you can do less vigorous activity or a little bit of both. If you are already meeting this, the American Heart Association recommends that you can increase that to 5 hours per week for even further health benefits. So where do we start if we're not currently exercising? It can be hard to fit exercise in as an adult if you're working. It happens that we slip out of the routine when we're not exercising anymore. And what we want to do if we're not is increase that intensity and the frequency slowly over time. So we want to increase overall movement, and that can mean just standing more frequently. That could mean walking a little farther, parking farther away from the building, whatever works to get you a little bit more mobile. We also want to overcome any of those but eyes. And what I mean by but eye are some of those things that are barriers to exercising, right? So we all have those things in our life that get us off track in terms of exercise. And one of those things could be, but I don't have time. We're all busy, we all work at OSU, and there's all kinds of things getting in the way of having enough time to exercise. But we have to take a step back, realize that this is part of those goals for my health, right? And we need to prioritize and think about how we can maybe fit this in. So just brainstorming ideas like finding ways to be more active at work, like taking part in an exercise program. I know there's some offered here by Your Plan for Health. Using a copy machine at the other side of the building, or just taking a longer walk to get your morning coffee from a different spot. All of those things can help increase that activity and not really impede on your time. But I don't have childcare could be another one. There are gyms with childcare. We could ask friends or family. We can, swap childcare with a friend. There are all kinds of options. Another really common one is I think exercise is boring, right? So we can do things to kind of help spice it up. We can do things we like listen to music or watch TV during. Totally fine, just keep moving. And then we can always keep trying new things. Dancing gets your heart rate up. You can play with your kids or make it like an appointment to work out with a friend so you're not doing it alone. Working out with someone else can make it more fun. All of these things, just brainstorm some things that might help you overcome your barrier. So we also have some tools out there that help encourage activity. Activity trackers like some of these like Fitbits or Apple Watches are a good one, but you can also just use your phone. You can use a piece of paper if you want to track how much you're doing. We just know that if you track, it helps you stay accountable. It promotes that increased behavior, that increased exercise. You can also use timers or alarms to track your minutes of exercise, or use that alarm to wake up earlier to exercise. There's all kinds of tools to help. Again, for all of these changes, this can be a lot for people. Like we were talking about how much this differs from the average American diet, right? So this could be a lot of change. And what we don't want to do is change everything that we're doing overnight. It's usually not sustainable. It's not going to be something that you do for the rest of your life. But making small goals can lead to big changes over time. So try and make your goals specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And try to set those goals, meet them, set some more goals to get to those big ones over time. So as much as we would like it to just be simple and we can just change everything about our diet and exercise and be healthy, we can try, but stress is also hard. Stress is going to interfere with some of those goals too. So if we're feeling stress, asking for help, finding ways to cope, providing self-care, some of these things here can be really helpful in trying to manage the stress, help us meet our goals. We also want to catch any harmful thinking that we're doing. So we all have that negativity in our brains that might be telling us things like, I can never eat my favorite food again. I'll never lose weight if my mom keeps baking me cookies. I haven't stuck to my diet at all this week. It is too cold to walk outside. We can all relate to that. I am the worst cook. Well, remember to think positive. Try and flip these things. Think, I can fit ice cream in every once in a while. I will talk to my mom about the foods that meet my health goals. I met my goals a few days this week, and now I know what I'm going to do in the future to help me meet them every day. I will do an indoor workout from an app on my phone today. I'm not going outside. I'll keep practicing, and I'll learn more about cooking. We also want to find a support system. So find someone out there that will support you, if not join you. Remember, so many people have diabetes or might be struggling with prediabetes and might want to make these lifestyle changes too. So go ahead and tell them why you're doing what you're doing, ask them to support your efforts, and invite them to join you. If you don't have a support system that might want to do this with you, you can always find a local group in your community or online to keep you from going it alone. So let's test our knowledge one more time. Mr. Potato here has been working with a dietitian for 6 months since his last A1C. He's exercising 30 minutes a day, and he is making half of most of his meals vegetables. He's lost about 5% of his weight, and his new A1C is 5.4. Which category is his A1C now? Normal? It's normal. I'm not even going to go through it. So he is so happy. He is so excited that he made these changes. He saw the results. He feels good about his body. He feels good about his health. And he is motivated to continue these changes. So I want to take this opportunity to also tell you about an exciting opportunity for OSU employees here at the university. There's a study going on called the Impact Diabetes Prevention Study. It's designed for OSU employees, and it's funded by the NIH. It actually, all these things that we talked about today from the diabetes prevention program, it is using those values in its program too. So the impact study is for OSU employees with prediabetes. You may be eligible if you have a family history of diabetes or an elevated blood glucose level. And the biggest thing, participants receive free of charge 12 months of lifestyle changes, or a 12-month lifestyle change program to assist with weight loss. So you can get more information about this program by calling, emailing, or visiting the website. I also have some flyers out here too you can take with you if you're interested in joining. But that is it from me. Any questions?
Any questions?
I do. Sorry. You talked about a group, and I wondered if YP4H has a diabetes prevention group to join?
I can speak on that a little bit. There is a document on the YP4H website that has all of those groups that you could possibly join. I don't have it memorized off the top of my head, but we can get you connected on that.
And I will say that impact study is a group-based study, I believe, so it is free. So if you're interested in that, that could be another resource.
Any other questions? Oh, that was a wave. Going once? Going twice? All right, well, thank you so much, Samantha.
Thank you.
I want to thank you all for coming out. Our next Lunch and Learn will be December 13th over at DLHRI. It's a healthy cooking demo with Jim Warner. If you have your evaluation form, please fill that out. We greatly appreciate it. We'd love the feedback from you all. And we'll see you next time. Thanks again.